Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Track Rat's Garage. I'm Jackson, but you can call me Jack Rat. Today we're going to be doing some work on the Speed 6, which you see warming up behind me. I apologize for the audio quality if it's a little bit poor. I have someone about a block and a half away using the loudest leaf blower known to man, so apparently it's going to probably come through on the audio because I don't have a bespoke audio setup. But anyway, today we have a fun day in mind because we have some performance springs, some lowering springs from Corksport for the Speed 6 that are going on. Now I'll explain in a little bit why I ended up going with lowering springs as opposed to coilovers, but there are several reasons why I did, both financial and performance ones, so we'll explain that in a minute. But this right here is a cool little sneak preview of everything that we have coming forward. These are all the parts that I've stockpiled recently for the Speed 6. Hopefully all of these and a couple more that haven't shown up yet are going to be going on in the next 2 to 3 episodes, the next 2 weeks or so. So we have the springs and suspension components, we have a gauge pod, we have the gauges themselves, new fog lights, fog light bulbs, headlight restoring. I have some paint in the car for the grille, and then we have these giant SP brake rotors. We have some Hawk 5.0 pads, and these are going on. They're supposed to go on today, but Hawk Brakes has lost my pads and had to resend them, so they should be here next week. But all of this stuff is going to be going on the car very soon, and hopefully, like I said, the next 2 or 3 episodes. But let's get to it and let's go on with the springs. Now, there are a couple reasons why I went with lowering springs, performance springs, rather than full coilovers. The main one is going to be obviously the price. This is supposed to be a budget build. I'm supposed to make this car, you know, as cool as I can for a specific budget. And the extra money you spend on coilovers, while they do give you more features and more capability, it isn't worth it to me, and I'll explain that in a second. A bad set of coilovers, which I would never buy, something like Racelands, those ones are going to go for $500 to $600 even for something like this. If you want a decent set, they're going to run you $1,000. If you want a really good set of coilovers, that's $1,500 or $2,000. That's something that A, I don't have to blow on coilovers, and B, I don't want to spend that much on coilovers. So these guys were on sale from Corksport for $220. It should lower the car about 1.5 inches in the front and about 1.75 inches in the back, make it just a little bit stiffer and that much better at handling without having that huge cost. Again, this whole thing is going to cost me about $220. Now, the second and most important reason why I bought these, this is the main thing that got me to buy these instead of coilovers, is because that car has some absolutely amazing suspension in it already. The geometry of that suspension is killer. It is awesome. So I didn't want to screw with that too much like putting coilovers would do. Now, with lowering springs, you're going to get that slightly stiffer ride, you're going to get a much better look, but you're going to importantly keep the base geometry of the suspension intact. It's going to be basically the same suspension, maybe a little bit stiffer, definitely a lot lower, but it's going to be the same thing, which is exactly what I want. The only complaint that I might have on the suspension as it sits is if you go full into a corner, really hard turn in, the car tends to roll a little bit more than I want it to. So hopefully these are going to get rid of that. If not, I'm going to be able to put anti-roll bars in there and make it just a little bit stiffer still, but I'm pretty sure these are going to do the trick, and that's going to hopefully get the car handling and aesthetically exactly where I want it to be. Because the one thing I don't like are the giant gaps between the tops of the tires and the wheel arches. It's great in the snow, it's great off-road when I go shooting. It was great this winter with all the snow we had, but I really want that more aggressive look. And of course, next winter I can always spend 4 hours and just put the stock springs back in there for the winter, which is what I intend to do. Now, the main complaint or criticism about lowering springs like this is that they put extra stress on the struts, and they tend to blow out factory struts a lot quicker, which is why a lot of people go to full coilover sets, because they are rebuildable and they are built to handle the extra spring rates. But I have a secret for all of you guys who think that. If you're starting with a base Honda Civic, then that's definitely true. If you're trying to put a lot of power in a car that was never meant to have power or handling, then the springs, the shocks, the whole suspension altogether was designed to be very simple and just get you from A to B. It's designed to absorb bumps but not really do much else. When you start with a car like this, or a WRX or an STI or an Evo, anything like that, the suspension is built so much better from the factory that the struts really can handle that stress. They can handle the stress of having a slightly more aggressive spring on there. And so you're not going to blow them out. And even if you do, these just replace your factory springs. Those struts are replaceable. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, well here's the new spring. Looks a lot like the old one because it's black just like the old one, which is there, but it's ready to go back in the car. First thing we had to do, if I can get the camera to focus, there we go, is remove the brake line here so that's out of the way. And then we had to remove the anti-roll bar end link right here, undo the nut for the strut knuckle right down here, and then underneath the car, underneath the suspension, right here, we had to undo the bottom of the control arm. Once we did all of that, this whole suspension unit fell away and we were able to pull the strut out and then use a spring compressor and pop that new guy in there. Now the rear springs are much easier than the front ones. All you need to do is remove the 14mm bolt back there and then the 17mm bolt right here, and then use this jack, and the whole thing just folds on down. You pull the old spring out and put the new one in. So all we need to do here for the back is remove the 14mm. That is the anti-roll bar end link, and then the 17mm at the bottom of the knuckle. All right. Alright guys, so it's the next day. Well, actually it's the day after the next day. You see, it's been raining pretty much non-stop here, including the day that I was shooting. I'm going to apologize in advance. I don't have very much footage of when we were doing the lowering springs because it started to downpour, and it did for about an hour, hour and a half or so. 2 or 3 times. We were out here for about 6 hours, and 3.5 of those hours it was just pouring down rain. We kept on working because we're from Oregon, that's what we do. Rain doesn't stop us, but I cannot have the camera out in the rain because I'm using my new DSLR. So I wasn't gonna risk having that out in the wet. So I had to put it away except for when it did temporarily dry out, so I only got a little bit of footage, and I apologize for that. But even though it is another moist spring day, I'm gonna give it an attempt to put on the brakes. We have everything we need. The pads finally came in, as well as all the other stuff that I needed. The front rotors were about a couple $100 for the pair, the rears were 140 for the pair, and the pads were 190 for the pair. And then I have obviously all the brake cleaner and the lube and stuff like that. So, you know, it's a little bit spendy. I don't like spending $600 on something that you can't really readily see, but at least I'll be able to feel it, and I'll have a lot of confidence in the car, even more so than I do now, and I have a lot of confidence in it now. So let's get started. First thing I got to do is I need to back the car up, because we obviously can't jack it up with it on the incline like this, and my whole street, in fact, is a large hill, So the best I can do is get it to the apex of the driveway, and that's the flattest place, and I'm going to jack it up and get going. Now what I've done here, because obviously we can't have the parking brake clamped on the rear wheels when we change out the rear wheels, is I use the driveway, the lip on the driveway, as a chalk. Because the driveway here, it's slanted up pretty steeply. So it's not like this car can move anywhere. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and give it a really good shove. And it doesn't really want to move at all. And I'm like 245 pounds, so me leaning on that with all my might is a pretty good testament. The car is pretty stable where it is. So, since I'm only doing one side at a time, that acting as a chalk on the back of the car should be plenty. So here are, again, those large factory brakes. We have to remove the two Phillips head nuts holding this on. We are going to have a couple bolts back here on the back of the caliper, and then we need to find a place to rest the caliper up here without it being in the way, without it putting stress on the brake lines. As long as we don't put any stress on the brake lines or undo any of the actual seals to the brake lines, we won't need to bleed the system, which I hate doing and don't want to do. So it's going to be pretty simple. Just going to remove these guys, maybe clean them on up just a tiny bit, pop the pads out, put the new pads in, take this rotor off, put the new one on. Well, we've got a problem. These two Phillips head screws, bolts, whatever they are, every time I try and remove them, no matter how I try and remove them, they are just stripping pretty bad. This one, before I even did anything, obviously the last person, the last repair shop that tried to do these stripped it out really bad, because this one is very gnarly. This one was pretty pristine, and I thought it might have been new, but these things are very, very stuck on in here. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get these ones out with the tools that I have, because I don't have an impact, which would be the far preferred way to do something like this. I just have these hand tools, whether it's a socket, Phillips, or this screwdriver. I'm going to go ahead and bolt this wheel back on, and I think we'll start with the rears, do the rears first and see what happens then. You know what, guys, it's just starting to rain even harder, and the clouds are extremely dark over the horizon, and it's starting to get a little late as it is. I had to wait all day for the rain just to stop. So I think that I'm just going to drop the car down, torque the wheel up, and give it a shot tomorrow. It's been raining all damn day. Hopefully we get a little break so I can do some work. So yeah, I think I'm just going to throw the card down and we'll try again tomorrow. By the way, this is exactly what it was like for about 3 hours 2 days ago when we were doing suspension. So we did 4 full corners of suspension like this.